community they serve. Today, I am honored to introduce our guest, Minerva Perez, the Executive Director of OLA of Eastern Long Island. Hi, Minerva.
Hi, Isabel.
Minerva has been leading OLA since 2016, and OLA has been instrumental in helping the Latino community in the East End. We are grateful for the opportunity to hear from Minerva about the challenges and successes of running a non-for-profit organization. After she tells us a little bit about herself, we'll go to a few questions, 6 or 7. So that way we can explore the world of the non-for-profit and the Latino community. Okay, so let's hear from you and then we'll go for the questions.
Thank you so much, Isabel. I'm really happy to be here and talk about nonprofit world, especially out here in the East End of Long Island, and specifically with a Latino focus. I'll briefly share that my work as an advocate has spanned many years, but I've been doing it in different ways, oftentimes through theater and through other means. I did some work in domestic violence as well. I ran the Retreats Domestic Violence Shelter for about 6 years. My work with OLA started when it was clear that there were many anti-immigrant sentiments and bills trying to be passed through Suffolk County. And I reached out to learn where was the support. And the name that came up over and over again, which I will say here in this interview, was Isabel. Isabel and the work that she had been doing to create and help create OLA as the founder, one of the founders of OLA. And getting to meet Isabel, I also felt welcomed in to the work, which I think is a key point for me, is that we can't do work and create boundaries around the work that we do. We create beautiful ways of responding to the needs of our community, and then we welcome people in to meet those needs and help support. And I felt very welcomed in by Isabel early on to know that, you know what, the work with OLA is very important. So ended up moving into this position as a full-time executive director in 2016, February of 2016. Not really.
Thank you for accepting that challenge. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for trusting me to want to bring me in. And February of 2016 was very different than November of 2016, because of course that's when we had a presidency come into the White House that really kind of shook a lot of things up and did some severe harm to our community. And I found that I was happy to be in that role, because that's where I felt most useful, is really taking a look at the work that our nonprofit could do and how we could grow to meet the deepening needs and the very complex and challenging needs of our community. Through this nonprofit work, I felt that that was the way to establish and to create a lot more support, was through a nonprofit. Nonprofit was the answer for me. So I'll stop there.
Okay, so thank you. So let's go to the first question. What are the biggest challenges facing immigrants today?
I mean, I guess I'll focus on the East End of Long Island. It is the area that I've spent the most time kind of with having conversations with our community members. Some recent immigrants, some immigrants from many generations back. But if I were to focus on Latino immigrants and immigrants, Spanish-speaking immigrants that are on the East End of Long Island, I would say some of the biggest things that people are facing are the very life and death struggles of housing, employment, healthcare, which can run through any family, even if it's a family of folks that are thoroughly and completely documented, but maybe they've got a new member of the family coming to join them here, which is how families have grown and succeeded and built their own kind of family empires out here, has been through successful small businesses and supporting education and opportunity for their family members as they grow and do amazing work out here and become pillars of our community. But within that family, even if it feels like a very successful family that's sort of safe and secure from everything, the reality is that at any given moment, there can be fears that are running within that family that relate to some of the basic needs. the housing needs that we have out here can change in a dime. Some of the employment work, or if you have your own business, what can shift in terms of your clientele, or some of the concerns that you might have around running a business and keeping that business up and going. We're not that far. There's so many things that have to be that people have concerns with. And then you look at some of the other aspects, which is that when you have your children going through our school systems and having opportunity, what kinds of opportunity exist? What kinds of access points do you have as immigrants? Because oftentimes there are limitations, or you feel that you're fighting for some of the ground or some of the opportunities that don't show themselves to you. Nobody wants anything for an easy pass. Everyone's working hard, but I think a lot of the challenges facing our immigrants are the balancing out the desire to have great success, be the contributing amazing members of a community, and not always have to fight to be viewed as having the value that of course we have. You're constantly in this space of not being valued, not feeling valued, and yet doing more and above and beyond maybe what other members of the community are doing to make this a healthy, safe, prosperous, beautiful paradise region. So you're constantly balancing that out, and it's not healthy. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we see, is because we are working with people that are doing such tremendous work out here, and yet in a turn of a dime, if they are the victim of a house fire, or the victim of a particular crime or wage theft, or their child has special needs, or their child is exceeding, but yet not having access to the same opportunities, it hurts, but it hurts in a different level, because there's a commitment to this community. There's a commitment to this country that is never, ever valued as it should be.
Yeah, thank you, Minerva. Mm. How have recent immigration policies or law changes impacted the community that you serve?
So I would say that the most recent in 2025 has been these stepped up overreaching powers of the federal government to try to change what local law enforcement, what local municipalities, what local schools, churches, that reach into our sort of the heart of our community out here, has been the most disturbing and upsetting, because we know that there's teeth behind it. These are not threats; these are realities. We've already lived through a lot of this at a lower level, I'd say, in 2017. So during 2016, 2020, a lot of the work that OLA has changed and developed and expanded out to do is a result of what we saw that we needed from 2016 to 2020. So at that time, I was just one person in this paid executive director role. We now employ 22 full-time people in OLA
Wow.
to do work across a number of areas to meet these needs that include
Mhm.
mental health for adolescents up to through college age. We have a team that's dedicated just to immigration. We are in the process of hiring a third immigration lawyer. We have a team dedicated just to advocacy, where we are working on growing numbers of wage theft. We have actively right now 40 cases of wage theft. We have illegal lockouts, illegal evictions. So why I bring all that up is to say that these changes that we're seeing from this particular administration are troubling, because we already know that our siloed systems make it very difficult for a lot of our families to navigate some things that can be kind of basic. But if you're trying to deal with a ticket to appear in court for a speeding ticket, or you're being illegally evicted from your home after living there for more than a couple of years, whether you have a lease or not, you have rights as a tenant. But a lot of these very basic access points to the law become erased when you add fear to it, so that folks don't feel that they even want to understand what their rights are, because they don't want to have to go to court. But meanwhile, that's where the exploitation kicks in, because people that know how to exploit people use this moment of fear and and real threat. So it's not just misinformation. There's a lot of real information. People are responding to that, but they'll use that to their gain. And we see that. And so the work that we do has to be stepped up 5 to 10 times more, because some of the laws that exist that are still protecting our community members, I can't even get to that conversation because our community members are so fearful because of the federal laws that are now overreaching into our communities and stopping up basic access to some of the human rights that our community members don't feel that they have access to right now.
What are the most common misconceptions about the immigration system?
Mm. That there's a pathway for everyone. That if you just work
Mhm.
hard and do it the right way, like my grandparents did it, getting through that narrative is very difficult because, first of all, the goal keeps moving. The goalposts keep moving. The right way is never the same right way.
Mhm.
And the fact that the right way that we've decided as a country meant that we take over part of Mexico to make it easier for us. When you change the rules of the game, you can't keep claiming that people keep breaking the rules. We have to have an accountability from our country's perspective on what is the right way for us to do something before we demand that someone else do something the right way. We are now in breach of so many laws. We're in breach of our Constitution. We're in breach of everything right now. We have no moral ground to stand on, that there is a right way. The fact that we don't want to hear any sort of cases of asylum, it's we're going to have to contend with what this country has done for many, many, many years to come. But a lot of the misconceptions that we find ourselves speaking to, and oftentimes even to people who are very supportive of immigrants and supportive of people immigrating because of need, because of refugee needs, or because of climate refugees, or financial refugees, or whatever the case may be, or violence in other countries. But is that there's just some sort of pathway. And oftentimes for many community members, there really isn't, or it's a very long pathway. And that pathway takes a few different routes. It doesn't just go straight. And that the biggest misconception is that our community members that are not yet documented don't care.
Mhm.
All they do is care. All they do is try to find money that they can work to pay an immigration lawyer that sometimes isn't a good person, that gives them the wrong information, that takes them along a ride for years or months and years, takes a lot of money that they have that they didn't even have, that they had to borrow, to then only say, oh, actually, now that we're looking at it, your case isn't very strong. We think that you should probably just close this case and back out of it, after they had first told them the case was very strong and they took $10,000. So we've got people that are exploited all the time for trying to do things the right way, for trying to go through an immigration pathway that might be valid or might not be valid, depending upon the kind of support that they're getting from that particular immigration lawyer or organization or what have you. So we've got many members of our community that are eligible for real aid and real immigration pathways. We're trying to do our best to at least work with them as we can, provide sometimes direct representation, sometimes pro se, and sometimes a consultation that will tell them, at this moment, you do not have a pathway. At this moment, it's very good for you to understand, do not be taken advantage of. If someone's going to tell you they have a pathway and you just need to give them $5,000 or $10,000, you need to ask these kinds of questions. You need to be prepared that this isn't a scam. So sometimes giving people that information is better than giving them nothing at all, even though it's not the answer that people want. And because people are so desperate to do things the right way, they will oftentimes, against our guidance, listen to someone saying, well, if you just do this and this and this, that's going to put you in a better position. There's only so much we can do, but it's never the case that people are flaunting their ability to remain in this country without complete legal permanent residency or citizenship. It's absolutely not the truth. And I feel like that's the biggest narrative to get over, is that people that are here that don't have full status don't care.
Yeah.
It is the absolute opposite. They're risking their lives every day because all they do is care. and that the opportunity and their opportunity to become citizens and contribute in all ways, building businesses, paying taxes, raising children that are valedictorians, that are exactly the students that our non-Latinos have to work hard to be just as good as, or try to be as good as. They're the challenge that we are thankfully that we have in our schools, are oftentimes our immigrant students. And so that's what our families are actually doing out here. And it's a terrible narrative to always have to fight against. So I like to be prepared to speak about all the ways that our, the opposite of what is kind of thrown out there as a narrative. But it's tough because you find yourself constantly responding to these sort of negative narratives.
Mm.
And it's a hard place, and it kind of grinds you down after a while.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, what role do non-for-profits play in supporting immigrants navigating the legal system?
Okay. I'd say each nonprofit might take a different piece of it.
Mhm.
Some nonprofits might focus in on domestic violence and sexual assault, or navigating that space. Some, it depends on the nonprofit. I would say for OLA, a lot of what we're seeing is that it's about looking at some of the systems that exist and understanding when we start to see certain trends that make it difficult to impossible for an immigrant to follow the same systems that a non-immigrant or non-recent immigrant, let's say, because we're all immigrants except for Native and Indigenous peoples. But if we see that there are trends that really get in the way of someone using the same system that John Smith can use, then we want to change that system. Then there's something wrong with that system. So a lot of the role that we play as a nonprofit is to not just put a Band-Aid on something, or to help a recent immigrant, or sometimes there could be immigrants that have been here for 2-3 generations, but some of these systems are very hard to navigate. But we might want to help that person navigate through, or give them enough information so they can do their own navigating, if they can, and then take a look at where the trends are, and then go back into that system and say, hey, it shouldn't be this hard. It shouldn't be this hard to get through this particular court process. It shouldn't be impossible to have an interpreter during a court process. It shouldn't be impossible to get materials also in Spanish, because the reality is many of our community members that are citizens even might not read or speak English in a way that is at the level of medical need. So if you're navigating a medical diagnosis, you should not have to work that hard to understand that medical diagnosis. You should not have to work that hard to understand sort of the legal ramifications of what might be an illegal lockout, or someone who's trying to steal your deed theft. You bought a home and you didn't realize you were being scammed. Understanding that process through a legal system shouldn't be that difficult just because English isn't your first language. We need to make sure that those processes are ones that are available to, and oftentimes, our citizens. But speaking legal English is different than speaking everyday English. So
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
are the ways that we are helping our community as a nonprofit, is making sure that as these systems, because we know a lot of them out here, whether it's in relation to public school, whether it is about special needs, whether it's about enrollment, whether it's about residency, any of those areas, if it's in healthcare, the access points to healthcare, navigating insurances, navigating diagnosis, transportation, navigating law enforcement as a victim or as a witness to a crime, what's happening with our housing, access to housing, all of these spaces usually have systems connected to them, and those systems work as absolute barriers. Sometimes because the town or the village or the institution doesn't know. But we find that as a nonprofit, when we show you and we make it clear in writing where that system is broken, it is now your responsibility to put money and resource to fix that. It is not up to us to continue to bring to you the same story, which is that, look, it's broken again. Look, it's still broken. Look, it's broken. It's broken. There has to be accountability on the other end of that. And that's also what we work to do as a nonprofit, is work directly with the community member, understand what the needs are, and then find out how to fix that, or how to address accountability if it's not being fixed, because we can't hear over and over again that someone didn't know that it was broken. It's not where we can exist. And then bring in more and more people to our organization that are living here. They have lived experience. So our organization, as it's grown, is made up of people from all different countries, all different backgrounds, many of them foreign born, and many of them growing up out here, lived experience, Latino and bicultural and bilingual, so that as we grow this organization, it's from the roots of our community, so that people can understand what we're working toward. We're working towards something better that everyone gets to benefit from, and that's an example of that is our mental health work. Is that we do that. I won't get into that, but that's an example.
Yeah, talking about that too, what resources, legal aid, mental health, financial assistance are available for undocumented individuals or members of our community?
Um, I mean, there are a couple of things in the books right now, like New York for All is trying to work to get undocumented folks connected to free immigration legal representation, which should be something that happens. So other aspects would be potentially legal aid if someone's going in and doesn't have representation for a criminal hearing. That could be something. There are certain resources like WIC. I mean, right now, I think it's very important. Certain resources like OPWDD. So if you've got a child with disabilities and you want to have other support for that child, I would say look into that. But the reality is that even if there are some support systems that exist that might come from the federal government, there are going to be really strong reasons why some people don't have the comfort level to reach out to the federal government, people who might not be documented, let's say. In terms of other resources that are out here, many of the housing situations might not be, people might not be eligible unless they are documented as head of household. There are a lot of HUD regulations that exist that come from the federal government. I would say that, well, there's food pantries, things like that. Some nonprofits might have some support systems in terms of rent assistance. For a while there, Ola was helping to run something called ERAP, which was coming out of COVID, and there was rent assistance for anyone, whether they were documented or not, but it wasn't going to the person, it was going to the landlord to make sure that they didn't get evicted because they didn't pay the rent for the last year because COVID. So it kind of depends case by case. I mean, what we really do is have people call Ola, and depending upon what their needs are, really kind of assess what we know that they might be eligible for. The SNAP, there are some services out there that we're assessing what's safe, what's not safe. It's not an easy situation right now.
Thank you. What are the biggest gaps and resources for immigrants, for the immigrant community, and how they can be addressed?
Sure. I think because we work in the east end of Long Island, so of course we've got 23 school districts, 10 court systems, 10 police departments, and so having some, I mean, at least in the east end of Long Island, having some consistency with support in those processes is very important. So we see a lot of gaps in that. As a nonprofit, we do our best. We can't be everywhere, and people are going to have to deal with some of those things on their own. But there should be advocates in those spaces to help people navigate some of those things.